Hey guys, I know I said I was going to be doing a discussion on Burning Abyss next, and hopefully that should still be coming within the next couple of days, but I really wanted to discuss this card because it's really interesting from a card game theory standpoint, and a lot of people have been making very bold claims about the card, saying that it's the next Maxx, it's going to be super broken, etc. So we're going to talk about Null, and Blooming Dogwood, or as is the temporary translation. And to start off this video, we're going to just go over the effect. So first of all, it is a water attribute zombie tuner, level 3, 0 attack, 1800 defense, but of course that doesn't matter, that's not what we're using it for. Its effect states, quick effect. You can discard this card this turn each time your opponent special summons and effect monsters during the main or battle phase. You gain life points equal to the attack of that monsters. During the end phase of this turn, if you did not gain life points with this effect, have your life point. You can only use this effect of Null, and Blooming Dogwood one turn. So, this card is... it obviously has some parallels with Maxx. Your opponent special summons cards, and you gain something. So we can look at Maxx. We'll start talking about Maxx because we can very quickly and easily analyze this card once we first look at Maxx. So the game operates on a few different resource systems. The first one, of course, is life points. Each player starts with 8,000, and once it hits 0, they lose. The other two systems are sort of two different facets of one. So you have your cards. You have your 40 to 60 card deck, and within those cards throughout the game, you have your available resources and unavailable resources. So unavailable resources are the cards that are still in your deck. You can't really do anything with them, which is why I'm calling them unavailable, but they are technically still there. They define the limit of what your deck is capable of possibly doing. You can get them throughout the course of the game, whereas available resources are cards that you can actively use. Those are cards in your hand, on the field, in the graveyard, or the banished zone. Not only do we consider the quantity of these cards, such as I have 5 cards in my hand, 3 in the graveyard, 2 on the field, but you can also consider the quality of the card resources that you have, whereas life points are just simply a number. Not all cards are created equal. Some are more useful than others, and some are more useful in different places. For example, Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring has a lot higher quality in the hand than it does in the graveyard. So Maxx strictly operates within the card resources. It deals with available and unavailable resources. Whenever your opponent is special summoning a monster, that is effectively moving around available resources. Some cards special summon from the deck, and that would be moving unavailable resources onto the field. But for the most part, what you're really doing is moving cards from the hand and the graveyard, or sometimes even the banished zone, onto the field. Generally, cards have a higher quality on the field. They're more useful there. And so special summoning monsters is improving your card economy pool by putting them in a more valuable place. When they do that, Maxx is allowing you to randomly add an unavailable resource into your available resource pool by drawing cards from your deck and putting them into your hand. So your opponent, whenever they're under Maxx, is faced with a question. Is my improving my own available resources going to outpace the advantage that my opponent gains from randomly adding unavailable resources into their available resource pool? And the answer almost always is going to be no. Because you're simply moving cards around, the improvement in quality going from your hand to your field is almost always going to be much less than drawing an entirely new resource. So when you drop Maxx on your opponent, they, even if they don't think about it in these terms, they intuitively understand this, and so they will simply cease their turn. That is insanely overpowered, and that is why Maxx is banned here in the G. Null, and Blooming Dogwood puts forth a similar question, but it complicates things by adding the other resource pool. So it, instead of interacting with unavailable resources and available resources, card resources. It deals with available card resources and life points. So, in the sense that it deals with available resources, you discard it from your hand to the graveyard. It does something in your hand, but it is so effectively worthless in the graveyard. We basically consider it to not exist anymore. That is a -1. You have essentially gone, if you're activating this on your very first turn, you've gone from 5 cards to 4 cards as far as we are concerned. So, within the card available resource card pool, you have lost a card. On the other hand, every time your opponent is going to be special summoning monsters to improve their own available card resource pool, you are gaining life points. And this brings up a very interesting problem that has had to be considered for pretty much the entire history of Yu-Gi-Oh! How many life points is a card worth? How many life points do you need to gain with Null, None, and Blooming Dogwood for it being worth it losing a card? Your opponent is most likely going to have to make the decision based on whether they're playing an FTK or OTK deck. FTK and OTK decks generally have a certain amount of damage that they can reach that they're aiming for to kill you. Null, None, and Blooming Dogwood does not give a finite amount of life points. It is hypothetically infinite, the number of life points it could give you. FTK and OTK decks are pretty much never going to outpace that. The only exception would be a looping FTK, which burns for more than it heals you. But those are, I can't even really think of one in Yu-Gi-Oh! History where that would be the case. I'm sure there probably is one. But for the most part, OTK and FTK decks are going to be encouraged to stop because you are gaining so many life points that they can't actually kill you. And boards that FTK and OTK decks that they end on for the combo to kill you are generally not very resilient and are easily broken, so they're going to stop. The problem with this card, and the reason why it is worse than Maxx, is because life points are worth a lot less than cards. We know this. First of all, we can just sort of intuitively figure this out because we don't play many life point gaining cards. We don't play cards like Poison of the Old Man, either burn our opponent or gain life points for ourselves. The other issue with life points is that not only are they worth less than cards by a significant amount, there are diminishing returns on life points. The difference between 3,000 and 8,000 life points is much larger than the difference between 8,000 and 13,000. Because life points don't really matter until you reach 0, lower life points are a lot more dangerous than is higher life points valuable, if that makes sense. And so, if you are playing against an Extra Link deck that, say, plays Gumblar and has Trigate, or maybe you're playing against old Pendulum Magicians that can set up, 3-4 negates, a lot of those decks are going to look at you and say, you know what, it's perfectly fine if you gain 20,000 life points, because I'm going to have so much card advantage that it doesn't matter. Cards are the only things in the game that manipulate life points. Having higher life points than your opponent is not an inherent advantage in the sense that more life points does not allow you to lower your opponent's life points further. Cards are so much more valuable than life points that they would rather extra link you and give you 20,000 life points. Or maybe even more. That is just how much better it is to have cards. And so this is the key difference between Maxx and Null, None, and Blooming Dogwood, and why, while Maxx was an incredibly broken card, I feel that Null, None, and Blooming Dogwood will most likely flop. It needs a very specific format where combo decks are not trying to create unbreakable boards, because even with OTK decks, the line between combo decks that are making unbreakable boards and those that are one-turn killing has been blurred, and in most cases, they're basically the same deck. Combo decks can do both, and so even if you went first and they're going second and they're trying to OTK you, if you drop this card, they're going to simply go, okay, sure, that's fine. We're going to make our unbreakable board, or we're simply just going to destroy yours. If you have 0 cards, it doesn't really matter how many life points you have within reason. If you have under 50,000 life points and you have 0 cards, you are almost certainly going to lose that duel in the face of an opponent who, you know, maybe only has 8,000 life points but has 10 plus cards, or has really powerful boss monsters that just do a lot more than any individual card you could top deck. I hope this explanation makes sense. I know I didn't stop to elaborate on things too much, but generally, I'm excited for this card because it really discourages a lot of FTKs, but at the same time, I just don't think it's as good as people think it's going to be. It's definitely not going to be format warping the way that Maxx is, and so at most, it's going to be a kind of an FTK repellent. It's going to discourage using those decks. If those decks ever become meta, people are going to start citing this card, and we should see it slowly fade away. It can also be a gimmick, gaining life points in games, 2 and 3. If you're going into time, you can side in this card. My one hesitation with that is it's sort of gimmicky. You could play any other card in your side deck that goes towards a specific matchup or whatever, and instead you're choosing to play this life point gimmick. We already have Firecracker and we don't play that card, which makes me inclined to think that this card probably wouldn't be played for that reason either. At best, it's a bonus on top of what its real use is, which would be against FTKs or OTKs. The other issue with this card is that, like Maxx, it isn't very good against control decks. A control deck like ALTERGEIST is going to say, yeah, I'll give you 2,000 life points for me to summon MULTIFAKER and Silquitas. Should have ran Ash Blossom, idiot. There's just other better hand traps against those decks, and it walks into the goal of those decks. Control decks want to simplify the game because of as few available resources in circulation as possible. So you're basically simplifying the game state for them by having this completely blank card, essentially. 2,000 life points is never going to be worth going -1 in this game. So, like Maxx, which... even Maxx, I suppose, is better against ALTERGEIST because you draw 2 cards. A better example would maybe be PALEOZOIC, where they just have a bunch of trap cards. They simplify the game. It doesn't matter if you draw some cards because they're gonna be totally awesome and all that already, and whatever few cards you have left aren't really going to matter. So, yeah, it's an interesting card, but I don't think it's ultimately going to be that great of a card. If any of the points that I made were in this video were confusing, as I'm sure they probably were, I just sort of blurted out what I've been thinking. I didn't really write any of it down, so maybe there were a couple sentences that were confusing. But if you have any questions, make sure to ask them in the comment section below, and I will have that Burning Abyss discussion within the next couple of days. It will be on Psychic Wielder, so you can look forward to that, and I will see you guys hopefully then.